Thank you. Kung ketika kamu itu. Môre.
Môre, hoe gaan dit?
Goed, dankie. Is dit Gideon?
Dis hy ja.
Aangename kennis, Melinda.
Hallo.
Ons het maar net vroeg begin sodat jy weet ons bietjie probleempies kan uitspreek. Ek weet nie of daar vrae is of iets wat jy vir my wil vra nie.
Nee, wat ek dink is reg, Melinda. Ons het
As ek sê ons is maar net vir connectivity, so ons gaan amptelik 9:00 begin. So jy kan jou ding doen en hoe wil jy begin? Wil jy die sessie oopmaak of gaan ek jou voorstel en dan begin jy? Hoe verkies jy dit?
Ja, Melinda, ek dink die maklikste is jy maar oopmaak en my net voorstel of gaan ek net so ietsie vinnig sê.
Okay, goed, ek gaan dit baie vinnig doen, hoor. Ek gaan nie lang stories vertel nie. Ek gaan basies vir jou ding laat doen en dan sal ons afskop.
Ja, 100%.
Okay, kan jy my mooi hoor?
Ek hoor jou hard en duidelik, ja.
Goed, dankie hoor. Lekker om jou te ontmoet. En dankie vir die geleentheid, ek moet vir jou sê.
Nee, is vir ons 'n groot projek hierdie skool.
En dan Johan het baie met groot respek van jou gepraat. So,
ja.
Julle besigheid fascineer my, ek moet vir jou sê.
Ja, is 'n interessante besigheid.
Ja, maar hoorie Gideon, ek sien vir jou 9:00. Baie dankie vir die tyd wat jy het.
100%. Okay, Melinda. Thanks for.
Good morning. My name is Melinda. We're just about to start. We've got 31 of 38 people. So we're going to start at 9 o'clock. If there's anybody who wants to raise their hand and ask questions before, I'll be able to see your questions on the screen. If you need any technical assistance, you can phone Rion. He's going to help us with our technical stuff. His number is 074 681 6908. Good morning.
Good morning.
Nikki, are you there?
Hi, Melinda. Yes, I am.
Okay, good. So the three of us are shared. Shall we start?
Yeah, carry on, please.
Good morning, everybody. Most of you are there. I'm hoping that the rest of you will be connecting within the next few minutes. We have an admin person that you can phone. Let me just give you the number. If you're battling with IT, it is 074 681 6908. My name is Melinda. You guys are here for assessor training. You might or might not know what that means, but that's why we're here. We're going to do 3 sessions for starters, and then we'll carry on and see how far we get with our portfolios. But before we carry on, I'd like to give Gideon a chance to just, from your guys' perspective, tell you a little bit about the project and why you're here. Gideon, over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Melinda. Yeah, good morning, everybody. I think first of all, from my side, congratulations on being here today. We've started off with this project about 6 months ago. And as you guys are all aware, the issue around food safety, food security, biosecurity is at the heart of what Astral does. So for us, this program is a big step forward. We regard this as the start of putting together a bit of a virtual training center for Astral. So you guys are really pioneers in terms of becoming accredited assessors and training within the business. So for us, this is a huge step forward. It's taken a lot of hard work, and for all the people involved, Melinda, Nikki, all the HR people involved today to put the program together. From my side, a big thank you. I would have loved to be there in person today, but yeah, COVID is disruptive all of us and all the operations. But again, enjoy the course, have fun, learn a lot. You guys are the custodians of applying good practice out in the operations in terms of keeping our standards and our business going. So well done, enjoy. And Melinda, for you and your team as well, thank you very much for the work you've put together and the work you guys have put in. And that's me. Thank you.
Appreciate it. And I must be honest up front, this is my first time. I've done smaller groups, so we're going to see how this works. As Gideon said, it's ideal, this training, to do face-to-face, but we're going to not let this thing beat us. We'll do it. And especially when the groups become smaller, we'll do a lot of interacting. And even today, I'm not going to sit here and lecture you for 3 hours. It's not what assessor training is about. It's not what you're about when you go into the workplace and look for competence in learners, because that's what you're actually doing. And that's what this training is about. It is about giving you, who've been selected, the opportunity to really assist other people, to demonstrate their competence, and competence not only in terms of national unit standards, which we're working with, but also competence in what the business needs from you and what the business requires from you. So even though we're not together face to face, I'd like you to try and make this as practical as possible for yourself. I often, when I do my real training, I say, close your eyes. Not everything I say is going to be relevant, but listen to what you can take for you from what I say. And please ask questions. We're going to try the polls and the questions and answer sessions. We hope it's going to work. I will be available non-stop. That's how I always work. So after the session, you can email me, you can phone me, you can WhatsApp me with whatever questions you have. During the session, we'll try as well. We're going to allow question and answer time. We're going to allow little breakaway group sessions. I'm not going to be able to take a lot of feedback. It'll just simply take too long, but we're going to see how we can go with this. I would just like to repeat that number because I am a little bit blind. So if anybody has connectivity issues, I'm just going to quickly give you the number again and then we can start. It's 074 681 6908. Right, so let us start. I would like you to first of all, have your files with you. And I want to see if everybody, let's try a poll. Does everybody have a file? If you don't have a file, maybe tell me. I just want to make sure that everybody, even if it's not your own file, that there is somebody with a file. Okay. Well, okay, looks like we don't have problems. So what I'd like you to do is to open your file on page 3. You'll see it starts with a program overview. There are 7 modules, but I'd like you just to page in one page, and you'll see there a little, what I call a money key, a little man running upstairs with a case in his hand. And that's just it's an image of how you're going to progress until at the end of the day, you're competent to assess your colleagues in the workplace. There's 7 modules. As I say, we start the first one with just a bit of the history of the NQF. This whole thing is very new, I would presume, for most of you. And I'm going to allow you to ask questions within the next probably 20 minutes, just so that I can see some general questions and see, you know, if you've had to do with this thing before. NQF stands for National Qualifications Framework, and that's basically the framework that SAQA, which is the South African Qualifications Authority, use to regulate competence and unit standards. Okay, so the first one is a little bit about the theory. Then the second module is about planning. And as you know, no matter what job you do, if you plan properly, the job will be more than half done. So we're going to look at how to plan for an assessment. You won't have to plan for every single assessment. There will be plans in place once you've developed them. It'll say which area you're going to assessing, health and safety, whatever. So you'll plan for that assessment, and you'll also have to plan how many unit standards, how many tools you're going to use. Then the fourth module is about evaluating and using assessment tools. So in other words, like anybody working on a farm, you'll have certain tools, you need certain things for the broiler, etc., etc. You'll have tools that you need to utilize as an assessor, and we're going to look at that. My apologies, I left out the second module, I'm sorry. Understanding standards and assessment. Once we finish the theory, we're going to look at what this actually means. What does a unit standard mean? What does assessment mean? And we're also going to look at assessment from not only this strict SAQA perspective, but just assessment in general. Because if we've been training people, we've really been doing these kinds of things for a long time. It's really about assessing competence, about seeing the competence of another person. Okay. Module 5, that's about assessment on the day. So you've done your planning, you've picked your right tools, you understand about the theory, you understand about your company. Now you're going to do assessment on the day. Okay. So we look at that, and that's normally quite practical. That module we'll be doing mostly, I think, in the 3rd session already. So we're going to try today do as much of the first 2 modules, and then module 3 and 4, the 2nd session, and then the 3rd plenary session will be modules 5 to 7. Okay. Modules 6 and 7, RPL processes and recording. We spend a lot of time during the training as well. So by the time we get there, we'll be in practical mode already, and we'll be doing quite a lot of portfolio building and things. Right, I'm going to ask you to do a quick exercise, and then we're going to take some questions and answers. What I'd like you to do is, wherever you are, whether you're in a big group or whether you're one-on-one, try and either physically or virtually turn to the person next to you, okay? You're going to ask each other 3 questions. And we normally do this right at the start of our programs, and I'd like to try this as well, even though it's going to be virtually. I want you to ask each other 3 questions. You are going to interview each other, and that's actually what assessors do when they gather evidence. They interview each other and they garner evidence, and then they have to record that evidence, and then they've got to feed back that evidence. So right at the outset, I want us to practice some of these skills. So the 3 questions you're going to ask either virtually, via WhatsApp or whatever, or just turn to somebody in the room, in the group, and you ask each other 3 questions. The first one, you might want to skip today, especially if you know each other, because that's just more a little bit about who you are and what you do. It helps me as the facilitator as well to understand. But we'll get to that again later with me when we get into your smaller groups. So for now, if you don't know the person, just check quickly who they are. Otherwise, you can skip straight to the second question. And that is what Gideon also alerted to. But I want you to think for yourself. Why are you here? Why did you go through the trouble of joining this webinar? It's weird for all of us. Maybe some of you have had more experience than others, but we're not used to this kind of virtual thing. We are, you know, we people, we like to talk to each other. We're going to be in the workplace. We actually have to assess our colleagues. So now we have to sit here in a vacuum. But still, you came here. Why are you here? What do you want to get out of this training? Yes, listen to what Gideon said, listen to what I say, but also think for yourself, especially if you've done a little bit of reading before. Why are you here? What is it that you want to get out of this training? Okay. Now, the third question, you're going to ask your colleague. Remember, all these things, you're not going to sit on your own. You're going to ask your colleague these questions, and they're going to feed them back. So the third question you ask is, what was your best experience ever being assessed as a learner? Okay, so you're now putting yourself in the position of a learner when you were assessed. And think broadly, it can be anything. Assessment can happen when you walk into a coffee shop and you say, oh, this is a good cup of coffee, or assessment when you go for your driver's license and you get tested, or a job interview. It can be anything. When somebody assessed you or tested you and you were the learner, what was the best experience you ever had? And then why? Why did it feel so good being assessed? Once you've done that, I want you sorry, I think we just have some problems here. Have you seen me? Sorry, I'll get to that just now. Right, question 3A I had, now question 3B. If you were talking about the best assessment experience ever, what would be the worst experience that you ever had? And also why? So when you were assessed as a learner and it was really, really bad, and why was it bad? Okay. So those are the 3 questions I'd like you to discuss with each other. Remember, you're going to ask the question to the person next to you. Why are you here, John? And John's going to say, this is why I'm here. And you're going to write it down. And then also question 3A and 3B. 3A is the best assessment experience ever you had. And then the worst experience ever you had. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes just to talk to each other During that time, if there are some connectivity issues, just let us know. But I'm going to be offline now for about 5 minutes while you guys ask those 3 questions to each other. As I say, you're not going to give feedback. We might take just 1 or 2 opinions, but this is just to get your feet wet and to get you talking about what assessment is and what it means for you. Okay, thank you. Hi guys, I'm back. If there's anybody who wants to ask a question, just before I ask you a couple of questions, please type the question now. And thereafter, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand and we're going to try a few things. Right, guys, I assume you can hear me. I might ask some admin-related questions to Rian, who's assisting me, and it seems that some of you are struggling, so let's just quickly run in to help one or two of you. But what I'd like to do is to see if one or two of you, or however many you want to, can you perhaps just think of a couple of good assessment experiences you had, and then I want you to type some of the words that you felt. Why? Remember, I asked you to say what was a good assessment experience. I want you to think of words, why it felt good. What was it that the assessor did that made you feel good? Somebody gonna try? Okay, let me prompt. Why do we feel good when we're being assessed? What's the first thing that comes to mind? When you were successful, maybe? It always feels good. When you passed, to use the old terminology, it feels great to be assessed and to be successful. And that's what you as an assessor need to remember. Remember that feeling when you assess people. And don't assess people, therefore, when they are not ready yet to be assessed. In other words, when they are not fully competent yet, when they aren't fully confident yet to demonstrate that competence. So remember that, but you cannot always be only successful. So even when a person is not successful and they maybe still need a little bit of help, it's your job as an assessor to make sure that they get to the point where they are ready to be assessed and where they feel that they are able to and want to demonstrate their competence. Okay. Right. Anybody else want to give me an example? Please type a question or hold your peace for the moment. Nothing. Right. Let me see if I can see questions. No. All right, let me carry on. If you cannot hear me, guys, I'm working blind here. Please send Rian a message. Okay, I'm trusting you can hear what I'm saying. I'm going to try one or two more questions and then I will carry on. As you thought of what made you feel good, I also want you to think of what made you feel yucky when you were assessed. Yes, it can be because you didn't pass. Nobody will feel well when they didn't pass. But it can also be when somebody just really didn't treat you well. I often use the example, and there's a number of them, but in the artisan environment, you get a guy who builds a brick wall and he's really proud of his wall and he practiced and he chose all his right bricks and his tools were sharp, etc., etc. Comes the assessor, gives the wall one look, kicks it over, say, come back when you can build a proper wall. Nobody likes that kind of feedback. Nobody. So even if that wall wasn't properly built, or that chicken wasn't warm enough, or whatever. Do not break somebody down when you assess them and when you're giving them feedback after assessment. Make sure that when you work with these people, you really want them to show the best skills that they have, because that's what you're doing. As an assessor, you are going to work with these learners. Now remember, you're working with the assessment sides. They've already gained the skills. They've already gained training, etc. This training is only focused on assessment afterwards. So once you want to give those learners their recognized points, if you like, that they can take with them even if they go elsewhere. So you need to make sure that they are ready for that assessment and that they have learned what they need to learn, and that now they are well prepared and they need to know exactly where they need to be on the right day, that they feel comfortable, that they didn't have to get into a taxi that was late, etc., etc. You need to make sure that assessment on the day is the best experience that that learner can have. And that's what this training is going to be about. We're really going to try and focus on making learning fun and assessment fun for both the learner and the assessor. Okay, I'm just going to take a 30 seconds break to see if all the admin is in order. Anybody want to ask questions? Okay. Speaking of admin, we're going to get to admin a bit later in the day. I want to get us going for a bit, and then we'll talk about admin and we'll talk about the portfolios and stuff that you need to be building for me. But I just want to get us started, and I'm actually going to do another exercise to make you just aware of what the National Qualifications Framework is and some of the principles around that. If you just give me 1 second. Oh, my apologies, guys. I just skipped an exercise here. Right, somehow that page is not in my file. I want you to go to your file and I want you to look at 2 pages where the assessment principles are. I'm going to tell them to you now. Just give me 1 second. Right, guys, I'm back. Sorry, page 12 and 13 of module 1 of your files. I'm not going to read through the files, but I want you to have a look at those assessment principles. Those are the things that when the legislation was first passed, and we're going to talk about legislation just now, those are the things that the powers that be, if you like, said that everybody, when they have to do anything with education and training and with new types of education and training, transforming education and training, those are the principles that you have to bear in mind whenever you work with people who are learning skills and whenever you want to advance education and training, if you like. So there's 2 pages of principles. My group work normally works that one group looks at one page, another one looks at another page. I'd like you to just turn again, maybe to a couple of people next to you. Doesn't matter, doesn't have to be formal groups. Just talk a little bit about some of those principles and talk about what they mean to you in terms of education and training. Integration is one. What does it mean? Integrate. integrating theory and practice maybe. What does it mean for you at Country Fair or wherever you work? How do you work with integration in terms of education and training? Maybe some of you have been working there for a long time, things are different. How do you work with integration as it relates to education and training, practice and theory? Another one, access, for example. What does it mean, access? Can you move in Astral from one place to another? RPL, recognition of prior learning, is another one. I'm going to give you 10 minutes this time to read through a couple. You don't have to get to all of them. Just read a couple of them, discuss in your group a couple of them, and then I'm going to go a little bit to theory. I hope you understood the question. It's really just looking at some of those principles, not all of them, and making them your own, thinking about what they mean for you as an individual and also as an Astral employee. Thanks. I'm going to mute now. Hi, I'm just checking in on you guys. I hope it's going all right. If you want to ask questions, I'll be taking questions. Just, while you're working on this, I'll also try to answer them. If you have questions that you want to ask me, if you maybe feel uncomfortable with the technology, I'm going to give you my WhatsApp number. It is 083 299 5886. Remember, what you are doing is you're talking about the assessment principles and you're trying to understand what they mean for you as an assessor and also as an astral employee and even as an individual. That's what you're chatting to about each other. Right, we're back. This technology is a bit tricky, I think, for everybody. Somebody raised their hand. Oh, sorry, the hand's lowered again. If you are battling to ask questions, as I say, there is a Q&A section either at the top or a button, either at the top or the bottom of your screen, which you can click, and then you will be able to ask the question. It can be either, now, let me just check with my admin person quickly. Dion? Right, you can reply in the chat that I had just said, or you can just click on the Q&A and then start a new chat. Or if all else fails, send me a WhatsApp. I'll answer that as well. And at some point, we will be able to answer live questions as well. We'll practice that in a short while. Okay, let me then give opportunity if anybody wants to ask a question or comment. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds. Raise your hand. Then you can talk. If you raise your hand, then you can actually talk live and we can all hear you. So shall we try that? Put my glasses on so I can see you better. The raise your hand option should be in the same panel where the Q&A is. Let's carry on. What I want to do briefly now is just talk you through some of these principles. Remember, normally you would give feedback. Just 1 second. There's a question. Sorry, let me answer the question, please. Kan ek nou begin? Guys, I'm dying on this side. You must please ask questions, but you know we'll get there. I'll also do some more practice before the second session and maybe practice with some of you. But yes, let's see. Let's carry on for now. I want you to listen to me a little bit about the principles of the NQF, and there's a good reason. I'm sure many of you, and I've got one learner here in front of me live, she's been saying, please tell me how I'm going to be assessed. Please tell me how I'm going to be assessed. And she's absolutely right. Part of this whole thing is obviously for you to be assessed as a learner. And we're going to talk a little bit about that after the principles, but the reason I'm mentioning it now is because the principles of the NQF is one of the things that you're going to have to understand and that I'm going to assess you on. You're going to be assessed in a number of ways, not only in one way. We're going to look at assessing your theory, your knowledge. That's why these principles are important. So you're going to have to understand what relevance means in terms of assessing learners in Astral. What flexibility means. Sometimes learners might be a little bit behind, or sometimes they need more practice or whatever. So these principles of assessment are also going to determine your practice as an assessor in many ways. So that's one of the first things we're going to ask you and that you're going to be assessed on. But the most important way of me assessing you, especially because I'm not with you to assist you, is through the production of a portfolio of evidence. So you're going to have to show me in practice that you can put together a portfolio of evidence. And that portfolio of evidence will be showing me you assessing 2 learners and going through the whole process of assessing 2 learners. Remember what we said in the beginning? First of all, you have to plan for the assessment, and I'm actually going to put it on the whiteboard for you. Just give me a second. Right, first thing, there we go, plan. You're going to have to show me that you can plan using a topic that you want to assess your learner. We'll look at unit standards a little bit later. You're going to have some kind of topic or, yeah, a topic. So for example, you want to find out how good the learner is at cleaning out, you know, health and safety procedures, those kinds of things. So you're going to have to plan for your assessment. And to do that, you're going to need a document that explains some outcomes that the learner has to achieve. So that's the first thing, and we're going to spend quite a bit of time on how to plan and how to make sure that you know exactly what you do and that your learner knows exactly what you do. Together with planning comes preparing. So after you've planned for your assessment, you as a learner you as an assessor need to also prepare your learner so that the learner understands exactly how they're going to be assessed. So that's the first piece of evidence that you're going to have to produce in your portfolio. Plan and prepare for an assessment. Okay? And as I say, we've got templates and stuff. I'll show you exactly how that works. After you've planned, like any job, you've got to actually do the assessment, conduct the assessment. So you're going to have to pick out 2 guinea pigs because you have to do 2 assessments. I always say it's easy to do 1 practical and 1 theory. So if you've chosen your topic on which you can assess, and I would like, as soon as I've gone through this flip chart, I would like to get some ideas from you guys. So if you can type me, instead of questions, just type me some of the content that you think you might be working on when you do your assessments. Think about the induction training that you guys are involved in, and just think of some content that you're going to assess, and just type that for me so that I can get an idea of the kinds of things that you will be doing and the kinds of learners that you're going to be assessing. Okay. So you've planned for your assessment, you've conducted your assessment, and obviously as part of conducting the assessment, you've got to make a decision. So after you've gathered the evidence, remember when we chatted to each other this morning and you gathered evidence about each other, you're going to gather evidence about competence, and then you're going to have to decide on whether that learner is competent or not, based on whatever is the outcomes that they have to achieve or the unit standard that they will work with. I don't think you guys have worked with a lot of unit standards, but that's why it doesn't matter as long as there's content. You've got to assess something in the workplace, and this is what this is about. So you've got to conduct your assessment. Then afterwards, and this is very, very important, and that's sometimes where it didn't happen as well as it should in the past. You've got to give your learners feedback, and you've got to give them proper constructive feedback. It's not just kicking down that wall, or if you're a journalist, your story being torn up, or if you bring an egg and the egg isn't pretty enough, breaking the egg, whatever. You've got to give your learner proper feedback and tell them about the good things and the bad things they've done. And that's very important. Remember, you're going to assess your 2 learners, say 1 on practice and 1 on theory. And I want to see that, evidence of that. So you'll fill in checklists, whatever tools you're going to use. And then you'll give the learner feedback. And after you've given the learner feedback, like with any job, you will review or reflect. What worked well? What didn't work well? What can I do better next time? Was there enough time for the learner? Review your assessment. And if you've done those 4 things, and we will spend a lot of time on how to do them, then you will be able to demonstrate your competence in practical assessment. Remember, we're starting with a theory. First of all, that's why we started with the principles. You will understand about the theory of assessment, and that we're going to do in assignments. And then you will go through this process of preparing for your assessment, conducting it, giving your learner feedback. And the feedback part is not only for the learner, it's also for third parties. Remember, there are other people in the workplace that also need to know about the result of this assessment. Maybe the supervisor, maybe the line manager, maybe even the seater. So there are feedback, or there is feedback that will happen both between learner and assessor, and then also to third parties. And then finally, like any job, every now and then you've got to sit back, reflect, and review your assessment. Okay. Let me see questions. Sorry, I'm just going through your questions here. Right, question from Nikki, very important. What are unit standards, and am I going to elaborate on them? Most definitely, if you remember back to this morning, that's module 2. We'll look at what is a unit standard in module 2, and that's still going to happen today. A unit standard is basically a statement of the ideal practice that you want to see a learner perform. So in other words, on that chicken farm, and I will need more specific examples for you, there will be some processes and procedures that you would have to follow in order to do your job well. And that's exactly what unit standards are. And I'm going to give you some numbers that already is being used. All unit standards have numbers, ID numbers, but they're basically topics. They describe exactly what it is that a person needs to do, and also what a person needs to know. And otherwise, practice and theory. So when you assess against the unit standard, prepare and make tea, for example, the kinds of things that you need to do will be listed in the unit standard. Things like getting a cup and saucer, switching on the kettle, making sure that there's enough water in, pouring out the milk. Those are the kinds of things that you have to do, and also that you have to assess when you assess your learners. But why do you have to do certain things? So, for example, the theory behind why you need to switch on the kettle. Otherwise, the water will be cold. Why do you have to clean the cup and saucer for hygiene purposes, etc. So the unit standard will have, in fact, 3 different components. The first component is what you have to do, and that's also known as specific outcomes. The second component is what you have to know, that's knowledge, theory, why do you do certain things. And then the third component is an interesting one, and that is what SATWA called critical cross-field outcomes. That is what happens when something changes or something goes wrong. In other words, you've now prepared, you're going to serve this tea to everybody, and suddenly, just before you want to, there's a power failure. So what now? How do you adapt to things that change, that are not always in your control. Do you have pre-boiled water ready? Do you have a gas stove? Do you offer them cold drink? What happens when something goes wrong, when something unforeseen happens? That's very important in the workplace. Things don't always go according to plan. I'm sure things don't always go according to plan with online training either. So, sorry, somebody's asking a question. Right. Please repeat critical cross-field outcome. I'm going to take you through the pages in the files as well in a moment, but basically for short, it can be critical outcomes. We get three, let me write them down for you. The three components of a unit standard and the three things that you will have to then assess when you assess a learner. So the first component of the unit standard are the specific outcomes, okay? Those are the things you have to do, the practical things. Clean the coupe. If you drive a car, put the car into gear. Okay, those are the first component that you assess, and those are the easy things that you can assess. You can actually observe a person doing things. Those are the specific outcomes, and they occur in every single unit standard. Doesn't matter what the topic is. Remember, there are unit standard across all sectors, topics, if you like. And depending on what it is, what the topic is, what you're going to assess, there'll be specific things that you need to do, see to assess. And those are called specific outcomes. Then, why do you do those things? The knowledge that you draw on to do those things, I'm just going to call it knowledge. The long word for that is embedded knowledge, but that's basically the theory. So knowledge. Now, using that practical and theoretical understanding, what do you do when things change, when things adapt, when you get a new type of machine, or when there's a power failure? And that for short we'll call critical outcomes. So those are the three things that you will, first of all, train or teach the learner. And then you will, as an assessor, assess those three things. And based on that information that you gathered about what the person can do, what they know, and how they adapt to new situations or when things change, that's what you will base your decision about competence on. Okay. And that's what you're going to show me evidence of in your portfolio of evidence. So you're going to find 2 guinea pigs. You're going to say, okay, these guys are working in the packaging department of Country Fair. I have to see how they do what they're supposed to do. You're going to sit down, plan how you're actually going to assess them, get your different tools, maybe the one you're going to interview, the one you're going to watch actually seal the packaging or whatever. And you're going to then also make sure if they understand why they're doing certain things. That's the knowledge. So you're not only going to watch him package the portions, you're also going to say to him, why does it have to be frozen to a specific temperature? Why does a specific plastic need to be used, etc. And then, of course, you're going to check whatever happens, and you'll know better what can go wrong than I do. What happens if we're not allowed in the factory? You know, how do we pack chickens remotely, for example? What do we do when things change? How do we adapt? And how are we equipped as learners to adapt to that? And of course, if they didn't get proper training as part of the induction, they won't know how to do it. So it's vital that you guys, when you go back to the workplace, understand that this training isn't nice to know. You know, it is really adding value. It is making sure that whatever you guys do really gets across to those learners and that they get recognition and opportunity to demonstrate their competence and recognition for their competence, so that they get a piece of paper that say, not only did I sit through induction training, but I now also am a competent packer of chicken portions, whatever. Okay. Gonna allow time for some questions again. Right, guys, I think we've been going for about an hour. What I want to do is give you a 15-minute break. Before you go to the break, though, I want you to quickly turn to the back of your files. Right at the back of the module 7. Remember, there's 7 modules. I think they have file dividers in them. Right at the back, there are a couple of admin pages. I want you to look at the one saying portfolio checklist. See if you can find that. There's like 4 or 5 pages at the back of the module 7. Can I just get a couple of raised hands if you can find it, please? Okay, I see you got it. That is the tool that I'm going to use to assess you with. I'm going to spend a bit of time after the break, but I thought if you have a look at it now, you can maybe start forming an idea. That is what you're going to have to put together in a file for me or a portfolio to demonstrate that you are competent in assessing colleagues. Okay. So we're going to take the 15-minute break. I'm going to be available throughout. I'm going to be off camera, but if there's any of you who want to ask questions or just say, oh, Melinda, I'm lost, then we'll make a plan. But just communicate with me even during the 15-minute break. Okay. Some of you say that you're lagging. Remember, we are recording it and we will be sending it. There's a lot of you, so I'm truly hoping that we can make this thing work. And remember, even if you feel lost today, it's fine to feel lost. You probably all feel a little bit lost. It's a fairly normal feeling. Never mind if you're in a normal classroom after the first session of assessor training. So this, I mean, I'm starting to wonder if you actually understand what I'm saying to you. So if you feel a bit lost, do not worry. This is the beginning of a fairly lengthy process. And I promise you, all of us, including me and all of you, will get to the end of it. That's my solemn promise. Okay. So take 15 minutes, ask questions, take a breath, and then we'll look at exactly how you will put together your portfolio of evidence. Thanks. Right, I'm back. I hope most of you are back as well. As I said, we're going to talk about how to put the portfolio together, and I'm going to try and be as interactive as possible with that. But before I do that, I really want to see if I can take some questions. You know, when we do this training normally, there's a huge amount of questions in the beginning, and it guides me and you. So if there's anything, and you can now ask anything, portfolio or Mel, I'm confused or whatever, just try and maybe get out of each of the groups just a couple of, even if it's opinions. I'd really appreciate some interaction. So if you raise your hand, I want to actually make you live, so we're all going to hear each other. So if you ask a question, you'll be able to be heard by everybody. I can start naming some names. I did my research over tea time, but I'd like to ask for volunteers. Anything you want to say or ask. Okay, I'm going to start talking about the portfolio, and maybe then you'll feel more comfortable to ask questions. Otherwise, I'm going to start picking on names, but I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable. But okay, let me try and be as specific as possible with regards to how you're going to be found competent on this training. Okay, so we're talking now about how you, after this training, will show me as the assessor evidence that you can do those things you see on the whiteboard. So first of all, I mentioned the theory, understanding assessment. That's the first specific outcome of the assessor unit standard. Remember the things you have to do. So you as an assessor have to show me that you understand the process of assessment as it happens in Astral. Then you're going to show me how you prepare for assessment. In other words, assessment plan, documents to invite your learner, arrangements about the venue where you will do the assessment, all of those. You're going to show me evidence. You're going to put paperwork in a file that shows me that you did plan and prepare for your assessment. Then the third one, conduct assessment. So in other words, you're going to have to assess two learners. I normally say the easiest is to do one on practice and one on theory. So let's use the example of a forklift. You can assess James on actually driving the forklift. And for that, you might need a checklist because you need to see James do certain things. And there will be documents available in your company already. I presume so. When you do the induction training, there must be ways of actually assessing, even if you just use your planned task observations. That's probably the easiest. If you look at the planned task observation, and there'll be certain elements that need to happen, and you as the assessor will observe them happening, and you will then tick, 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 say, yes, James did this and this and this. Maybe he must do more on this, etc. So that's the first learner that you're going to assess. How James drives a forklift or services the forklift or whatever. Okay. The second learner, because you don't, for the purposes of the portfolio, you need to do two learners. So in practice, in real life, you're going to assess James on practice and theory of forklift. But for the portfolio, I only want to see one practical and 1 theory. So you'll assess James on driving the forklift, and then Tabo, you'll assess on the principles of safety in the workplace while driving a forklift, for example. So 1 practical task observation, and then 1 theory related question, where when we look at the how, the embedded knowledge that we mentioned, how and why you do certain things, the theory and the principles behind your practice. So those are the 2 different types of assessment tools or instruments that you need to do, and file copies of it in the portfolio or in the file. And then remember, we also spoke about feedback. After you've done the assessment, you've got to give your learner feedback. James, you did very well with checking the safety checks and stuff, but once you got into the forklift, you forgot to put on your seatbelt, if they have one, for example. So you'll give James proper feedback, and you will also give Tabo proper feedback on the theory of safety in the workplace. I have a question. Good question. Should both assessments be on the same unit standard? Answer, yes. Why? Because it's easier. Then you can only do 1 plan. So you can pick whatever topic you like, but it's always easier to pick 1 assessment, 1 topic, then you only need 1 plan. So it can be PPE, it can be quality, yeah, something to do with the broiler, whatever. Pick 1 topic and do 2 assessments. 1 practice, 1 theory, and I want to see how you got to that. So it's the planning around your assessment, preparing your learner, actually doing the 2 assessments, 1 practice, 1 theory, then giving both learners feedback. And that feedback also must be evidenced, remember. So you've got to have a checklist, or you've got to write a little email or a note. Any way you can record and prove to me that you've given your learner feedback. You didn't just leave him after he did his assessment, and that it was proper constructive feedback, and not only the negative feedback, but the constructive, the developmental feedback as well. Where did you go wrong? Yes. Where did you do well? And where to from here? There's always a process. Today we've learned this. Now we'll have to move on and do this and this and this, so that they also understand the bigger picture in terms of how the assessment will work. Of course, there's a whole bunch of company-specific things around this process that I don't have access to necessarily, but you will have people guiding you. You will definitely have people telling you, this is how we're going to implement it. This is what happens. Maybe even this is the documents. My role here is just to make you familiar with the process of unit standards or topic-based assessment, and to also stress the importance of doing it in a, I almost want to say, user-friendly way. You know, it's a humane thing. You must want the learners to demonstrate their competence. They must want to demonstrate their competence. Okay, and that's why a review afterwards is so important. Did this work? Did this new process of assessment actually work? Did they understand what they need to do? Did I, as the assessor, understand what I needed to do, or was I very confused? And where do I go for help? Who is my moderator? Who is my line manager that can assist me with this new process? And of course, that's all part of the review. And before you get to that part, in reality, that's why you put together the portfolio of evidence, because it's a practice session. After this training, it's a practice session where you go back in the workplace and you actually start working with these documents, working with the learners, recording it and putting it together in a file, so that you know how to assess when it's going to start in your company for real. Now I've got to ask you to ask questions, please. You can find a lot of detail on how to put together the portfolio in Module 6. In fact, Module 6, page 9. You'll find all the different topics, bullet points of the assessment checklist there, the portfolio assessment checklist, and it also explains to you exactly what you have to put into each section. For now, I want you to focus on the actual evidence of assessment, that you know how to draw up an assessment plan, or you understand that you have to do it. You have to assess 2 learners, you've got to give them feedback, and you've got to review. If for now you only get that, the how we'll still get to. But if you get that, and if you have that in your head and start closing your eyes and think, how am I going to do this? How am I going to draw up a plan? How am I going to prepare my learners, etc.? Then you would have achieved the first goal. Yes, there is an example of drawing up a plan. After Module 2, there's a whole thing called an assessment guide with 12 sections in it. For those of you who've been through it maybe before and will remember it. Section 4 of the assessment plan at the back of Module 2 has an example of how to draw up an assessment plan. The assessment plan normally starts with the content of what you're going to assess. So if you have the unit standard or the plan task observation elements, that will form the basis or the biggest part of your plan. And of course, like with any plan, after the what you're going to assess, you'll have to say how you're going to assess. In other words, which tools am I going to use? My plan task observation checklist and my case study or my interview or my knowledge assignment. That'll be the what I'm going to use. The plan will also contain logistics. When am I going to assess this learner? Where I'm going to assess this learner? What the learner needs to bring? What the assessor needs to have? Who's going to be responsible to make sure that the venue is prepared? For example, if we have the forklift, who's going to check the forklift? Is it the job of the assessor or the learner? If other people needs to be present, needs to be informed, if it's going to be an assessment in the work yard, people might have to know an assessment is taking place. Okay, so it's the logistics. And then it also needs to mention how and when feedback is going to happen. In other words, don't call me, I'll call you. Or direct feedback often in the workplace is the best thing, especially if it's plan task observation. You can always do the formalized, and you have to do formalized feedback later, but it's very important there on the job to explain to that learner how they did. Make them feel comfortable, put them at ease, etc. And then, of course, in your plan, you'll also just have to mention that you will be reviewing your assessments. But you're welcome, and we will probably during the next session have a look at that assessment plan section for section, or assessment guide with the 12 sections, because a lot of the stuff that you need to, or the templates that you need to use is there, and they are available in Word format as well, so you can adapt mine. always better to use what the company already uses. If you're in the beginning of this process, you might have to develop some documents as a group. It's not according to the unit standard, the job of the assessor to develop assessment tools. It's actually something that needs to be given to you by a line manager or an assessor who, sorry, my throat's going. An assessor who's experienced, you will get that documents hopefully from somewhere else. If not, you're going to have to actually develop them from scratch. Right. Questions? Just check my connectivity, 1 second. Okay, guys, thank you for the questions. Let me tackle them 1 or 2 at a time. First question about what is the end result of assessment and feedback. Now this I'm going to answer as if it is you guys as part of the induction assessing learners. So in other words, people that you take through the induction. The answer is the whole reason, I almost want to say, that you're here on this training, because yes, the reason you're doing this assessment is so that at the end of the day, you can give those learners that you are going to be training as part of induction and assessing, so that you can give them recognized certificates that are accredited by your CETA, which is Agri-CETA. So bottom line, at the end of the day, is this whole process that Astral is embarking on is in order to, I almost want to say, formalize the induction process and make sure that when learners are trained, they understand that they're actually getting something out of it as well. So it's not something that they just have to go and sit through and listen to a number of things. They are going to be getting new skills. Those skills are actually going to be assessed and recognized and certificated by a recognized certification body. There'll probably be certificates issued by Astral as well, but Astral as an accredited provider of Agri-CETA. So most definitely, and that's where the unit standards come in as well. All those topics, so that's the way they actually award value to certain bits of knowledge. So there will be a unit standard on health and safety. There'll be a unit standard on forklift practices. And your certificate will say, me, Thabo, was successfully trained and assessed on forklift driving practices, which is unit standard A, accredited by Agri-CETA. So this means that when Thabo, for whatever reason, has to leave Astral and move to another company, he will be able to take that forklift driving certificate with him, and he will prove to the new provider, the new employer, that he can actually do that work. He has been trained, he has been found competent to do that, and then he doesn't have to be retrained. Okay, hope that helps.
Melinda, sorry, can I just interrupt? It's Nikki.
Yes, Nikki, hi.
Hi, just for the purpose of clarity, right? The unit standards is not something that this group will be responsible for. That will already be drawn up and shared with us. Isn't that so?
Absolutely. Thank you. That's a valid point. You as you, now I'm talking to the whole group, you as an assessor will really not be doing much else than checking competence. So you'll be training your learners and you'll be assessing them. The documents should be there for you. So the unit standards doesn't get drawn up by individual companies anyway. They are nationally developed standards. So there will be minimum requirements for all forklift drivers, for example, no matter in which company you work. If you work for Volvo or in the agriculture sector or in the construction sector, unit standards will exist already. They pre-exist. Your job as trainers in Astral is to train or induction, whatever you call it, to prepare the people that you train to do the things you want them to do in Astral. So it's about practice in your company, okay? That's important to remember. And the way you assess them also must be, first and foremost, to test them on what you've trained them and what you want them to do, as per the planned task observations. The unit standard is almost an extra layer that you won't have to worry too much about. As Nikki said, somebody would have done that pre-work for you already. So somebody would have made sure that the training material that gets transferred to the learners not only meets the company requirements, but also meet the minimum national requirements. So by the time you stand in front of your group and you train them and you assess them, somebody else would have done the difficult work already. So somebody else would have looked after the compliance issues. So your main job is not going to be that much different. You will have to implement documents that would be given to you, but you won't have to generate unit standards or training material from scratch if it wasn't your job already.
Okay.
I hope that helps.
Yeah, so if I were just to add a little bit more clarity, right, for
Yes,
everyone
please.
on this group. So currently, I think the reason why you are here is because you offer some form of training on site. So it could be in the form of induction, quality, or biosecurity. So what you would use currently is the training material that is already available. So we don't have to recreate those trainings. Where the new skill comes in is obviously we have to assess the trainers. So after we do the training, we have to see how effective the training was. And this is what this framework is all about, teaching us how to ascertain how effective the training was, and also to put together what sort of documents we would need additional to what we already have, because that's why we talk about planned job observations. We somehow have a lot of that in place already for some of the risk stuff. We've got checklists in place for our biosecurity practices. So we just not have to go and reinvent the wheel, but currently or build on what we currently have.
Exactly.
Okay.
Good.
Okay, thank you, Melinda.
Pleasure. Any other
Letting me
questions,
interject.
maybe to Nikki specifically or to me? Remember, this was a project that was thought through. And one of the main reasons is actually, I think, to also uplift the, I don't want to call it the status of the induction training, but just to give meaning to the training and to give people who go through it recognition. It's, you know, it's fine to train a lot of people every couple of months, But it's also important for those individuals to understand that this is something that they can take away with them. And they actually get recognition for what they learn. Also for you as an assessor in Astral, this is a skill that you can take with you, or doesn't matter where you work. You know, once you have the technical expertise to assess, you only need to undergo this assessor training once, and then it gives you a license to practice almost. So no matter what field you're assessing in, if you're a nurse, or if you're a psychologist, or if you're a bricklayer, or if you're raising chickens, it doesn't matter. Once you've got this recognition as an assessor, you can assess whatever you have subject matter expertise in. Okay. More questions? I'm going to give a tiny bit of more time for questions. Maybe, Harry, you've been very active. I see. I've got some other names that I noticed.
So our current training material would work, and yes, Nicole, there will be next.
Right.
So Melinda, Nicole from Meadow PE had a question, and she wants to know if the current training material, which is, would it be their work instructions? So I just replied, yes, it will be your work instructions. It will also be like for everybody else in the group. It would be your biosecurity procedures. It would be some of your quality procedures that you have in place already. So I think we wouldn't necessarily have to reinvent any training material. We would use what we currently do. Like we said before, the idea is to evaluate the effectiveness of the training to make sure that people understand what is required of them in the proper manner, to upskill them, make them feel like they've achieved something with this training. It's not just something that's just done because it's a requirement. It's there to really put in the effort and make sure that they take some value from it. And of course, all of you learn a new skill that you can take away as well.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you. There's a question about, what about moderation of assessments? Vital. Very important question. The process, the SACWA process asks for a three-tier process of assessment. Number one, you actually do the assessment, and then there's an internal check or moderation of the assessments, and then there's an external check or moderation of the assessments and the process from your SETA, your Sector Education and Training Authority. In Astral, people will be, I know there is one person appointed, well, not appointed, external moderation is happening at the moment, but it'll also be the role of that moderator to make sure that the assessors get the guidance that they need to do, you know, all the requirements that is necessary. But you must also remember that assessment and moderation are roles not dissimilar from what you're already doing in your organization. If you already do the induction training and you assess the people, that won't really change. You know, if you're in HR or an ETD, you do certain things. And the words, tags, assessment and moderation are really just roles added on to what you do in your everyday job in any case. So you don't have to suddenly appoint a whole lot of assessors and a whole lot of moderators. It's just an add-on process that's going to enhance and give external recognition to what you're doing internally with your learners. I hope it makes sense. As I said, the moderation will happen. That I'm not exactly sure. I know there is one specific person that's going to do moderation, it might be that ultimately a lot of the supervisors or the line managers that would do it anyway and check on the process will just perform the role in the end of a moderator. I hope that helps.
Melinda, can I just elaborate as well, please?
Yes.
So with the moderator function, for the guys on this course at the moment, we don't have to worry about the moderation function. Like Melinda said, it will be outsourced. So the HR team will put together that whole process. So your role literally stops, I think, where you do the training, you assess the competency of the learner and you hand over that information to somebody. Now that process from the somebody to the moderation to filing at the CETA is something that still needs to be worked on, I think.
Nikki, may I ask a question to you?
Gosh, I hope I can answer it.
I'm
yes.
sure you can. And it can be answered by anybody. Just to give me an idea, your guys who do induction training, and anybody can answer this. Do you actually currently assess learners? Do you check if they've understood what you've or taken in what you've done?
From my experience, when I audit the SABS standard, which says you should look at how is competency of a learner assessed, I see very little or no evidence of that having been done. The other guys can comment. Maybe they can also
I would love
share.
some comments, because I think this is bringing us to actually what we're doing and what we should be doing. So if more of you can actually talk live, it'll really help. I just want to hear your experiences about how you're currently doing it, and maybe your thoughts about what's been going on here this morning and how you see it actually working in practice. I would really appreciate that.
Melinda, I see Vernon's made a comment, so maybe you would like him to elaborate
I would like
live
Vernon,
and
can
share
you
with the rest.
in any way go live maybe?
I think you'll have to let him, you'll have to give him,
Yeah.
unmute him or something. Maybe just
Yeah.
ask Rian.
Okay, let's try and unmute Vernon.
Vernon's from County Fair, which is the commercial leg
Vernon,
of
there
our
he is.
business. Yes, that's him.
Okay,
Yeah.
Vernon, let's see if you can go live.
Can you hear me?
Perfect. Yes, please.
Yes, we can.
Please.
Right, so at the end of the induction training, there's an assessment, which is then afterward marks, and a level of competency is then. So there is a form of competency test after the training.
Okay, now it's exactly that same thing that you will probably use, just in a more formalized way. Vernon, do you maybe want to give us some examples of how the process works, what you're currently doing, so that we can see how we can adapt that, or what you will need to adapt, or maybe you just carry on with what you're doing and you just report it to somebody else?
I'm going to pass it over to Zed, which is up for it.
Sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Hi, Melinda. It's Zed speaking.
Yes, hi.
Okay, so I'm basically the one that's doing all the site and the training on site at Epping. And we have different methods that we actually assess. For example, induction training, we have a video, Astral video, and the Astral test that gets written at the end of the video. And then, for example, our job descriptions, it's a theory, and included with the theory is a physical assessment. So you will have a person with a certain job description, you go through the points of the job description, and when that theory is done, then the actual supervisor goes in with the person on the job description, and then next to each point of the job description is a yes or no. So the supervisor will then assess, does the person do each point of the job description? It gets signed off by both parties, the person signing for the description and the one assessing. And they also have a feedback section on the job description. And then the supervisor will then say, okay, the learner was competent in this specific assessment.
Okay. Okay. So you can see that you guys are actually doing a lot of this already. I think the main difference between what you're currently doing and what this process will add, because that's what it's doing, it's adding, it will give both the assessor and the learner actual formal recognition. I'm not sure that at the moment you will issue certificates, do you?
No, we don't.
Yeah, so it'll just formalize, and that's the whole idea. And when we go, and we actually should be getting into a tiny bit of theory just now, but the whole idea behind this whole NQF thing and the principle of the NQF is really to formalize and to give people recognition for competence achieved. Especially, you know, in the past, often people worked for years and they learned so many things, but they never ever had a piece of paper to prove that I can actually go to another chicken factory and do a job. You know, people didn't get recognition for skills achieved, and people didn't always learn why they needed to do certain things. You know, it was like, you do it and that's it. But this is just a process of giving those people better recognition, giving them career paths almost, so that you can progress from one step to the next, and that you get recognition on the way, so that you can also transfer those skills maybe to somewhere else and don't have to start from scratch. Or if you lose your job, you can never find a job again because you can't prove that you can perform a certain skill. So I hope that helps. I'd like to take more questions on the actual putting together of this evidence. I want to make sure that you actually understand that after this process, you really you need to show me how you do the assessment part, how you will plan for an assessment, what's still on the whiteboard there, how you will assess your two learners, how you will give them feedback, and how you will review. I just want to make sure that we're on the same page, that ultimately is the one set of outcomes of this process that you're part of today. You need to show me evidence that you can actually, and it's not me specifically, it's the CETA, so that you can get registered as assessors with AgriCETA. You need to prove that you are able to assess learners, and before that plan for it, and after that give feedback. Okay. I will try, and once we get to the smaller groups, have examples of portfolios and examples of templates and stuff, just to make things easier for you. But let me see if I can take any more questions on the specific portfolio building process, and then I want to move back to the files just a little bit so that I can get some of the theory over to you. And then, of course, afterwards, you can ask me as many questions via phone or email as you like on the portfolio development. So let's see if there's anything more. Right. What I'm going to do now is take you back to module 1. I just want to go through some of the slideshows. Right, I want to take you back a little bit. Rian, kan jy net vir ons na die eerste slide toe? Okay, gaan ek dan volgende slide hê? Right, guys, I'm going to talk you briefly because hopefully a lot of this you would have read before the training or as part of what happens here after. I'm going to talk you through a brief history lesson of why we're doing all of this. How did the NQF or the National Qualifications Framework start and why did it start? Now you can see there, and this you'll find in the first couple of pages of your of module 1. You can basically just listen to me, and if you want to follow, it will be more or less, yeah, we'll be starting at the beginning actually on page 5, and then we'll be going, if you want to follow me through the pages, you can. But early on, you can see there, before democratic government already, people realized that we need to make a plan with education and training in this country. It cannot be like it used to be, those who have know and those who don't have do. So we needed to lift South Africa in terms of productivity, in terms of inclusivity. You know all the stories, okay? So vital, vital, vital that integration of theory and practice, of education and training happens. If we want to uplift skills and productivity, we have to look at how our training happens and the discrepancy between the 27 different departments, etc. So, how to do this? They decided they're going to propose the National Qualifications Framework, which ultimately, after many years, became in 1995 one of the first pieces of legislation passed after democratic elections, was the South African Qualifications Authority Act. That act governs how people in this country should train and be assessed. It was promulgated by the Department of Education, but in conjunction with the Department of Labor. And can you see there how they try to integrate integration and training? Department of Education, traditionally formal classroom-based education, university, whatever. Department of Labor was the world of work, how you actually implement, hopefully, what you've learned. So in order to integrate those, it was decided that the SAQA Act will be governed by both departments. Any quick questions there before we go on? Go to the next slide. I'm just seeing some questions. All right, thank you, Nikki, for answering that. I'm going to have to work on my access to questions for the next session, guys. I do apologize. Next slide, yeah, right. There you can just see, carrying on, the CETAs was established in 2000, Sector Education and Training Authorities. They worked within labor to make sure that whatever providers taught got implemented properly in the workplace. ETQAs, that stands for Education, Training, Quality Assurance Bodies. That was established per sectors, and then those bodies also started the process of training assessors. So you can see how long ago this process actually started. In the early 2000s, assessors already started to be trained to make sure that skills in the workplace get their appropriate place in being recognized, and that you don't only have to go to a theoretical institution to get skills and knowledge and recognition for what you do. Okay. Right. Is that one? A little bit on what the National Qualifications Framework means and what it looks like. You'll find that on page 7. When they originally introduced it, they said there were 8 levels to the NQF. NQF level 1 is equivalent to grade 9 or school leaving, old standard 7. Then they had NQF levels 2 to 4, level 4 equivalent to matric or a further education and training certificate. And that's where the focus was for a long time and still should be, to uplift skills in that further education and training bands. In other words, they said, okay, schools are all right, and there are other bodies to look at training and education in schools, but the NQF, the National Qualifications Framework, needs to focus on uplifting skills in that further education and training band. In other words, the old standard 8 to matric, or where you would go and do artisan apprenticeships, or the new grade 10 to 12. And that's also where a lot of the learnerships were established in that further education and training bands. Levels 5 to 8, that's higher education band. That was not originally the strict focus of the NQF. And as things progressed, in 2007, they redesigned the framework, and now there are 10 levels to the NQF, and that you'll find over the page. But really, the focus where the huge skills backlog is, and I think that's still where a lot of your training happens, the induction training as well, are those levels 2 to 4, where people really need to be trained and recognized in terms of new skills, and skills that they can actually apply both practically and theoretically in the workplace. Okay. Let's move on. Then we did the little exercise, you remember at the beginning, about the principles of the NQF. What is very important for you as an assessor is that you really try and make these things your own. As I said, you know, how can I, as a lecturer or a trainer in Astral, make sure that I integrate practice and theory in my training, in my induction? How do I make sure that it's relevant? Yes, you'll get a lot of stuff from the powers that be, so you'll make sure that your training is sort of relevant, but also how is your training relevant and how is your assessment relevant? When you assess somebody on driving a forklift, don't let him write a 3-page essay on how to, you know, he actually has to show you how to do it. And so you've got to go to each of those principles and try and make it your own. Flexibility. I can be flexible as an assessor in terms of giving people extra time if maybe they're not finished yet. But I can also not be so flexible that I become unfair to somebody else, and so on. I want you to actually, after this, also look at all of those principles, and each and every one of them, you need to think how you will integrate it in your practice as an assessor. Okay. Outcomes. I've heard a lot about outcomes-based education and training. Outcomes basically means the result of what you've learned at the end of the day. That's also what is assessed. The outcomes at the end of the process. It doesn't really matter where you learned. Yes, mostly you will learn through the induction process, but it really doesn't matter. You could have come from somebody else or somewhere else, but it's about not what the instructor puts in, but it's what the learner gets out at the end of the day. And that's what you also measure when you do the assessment. You measure the results of the learning process, and that's how you draw up your tools. It refers to both what you know and what you can do. I'll just break a second and see if there's any questions or comments. Put my glasses on. Remember, as I said early this morning, you got to, in your head, especially if you're getting a bit lost, try and think of all of this, how you will do it when you do your training. How are you going to see if these people can tell you what they know and what they do, for example? Right, I'm going to do a couple more slides and then we're going to take our last break of the day. So let's just move on a bit for now. I'm going to skip this one for you. Okay. Remember those critical outcomes that I spoke about this morning? Here are some of the specific ones. I just said to you, when you assess critical outcomes, it is how people adapt to different situations and to new situations and when things go wrong. But SACWA has actually identified a number of critical outcomes or critical cross-fields outcomes. And one of the most important things that learners need to learn and demonstrate and do, no matter what their level is, they must be able to identify and solve problems within their own working environment. It's not just the boss that's supposed to solve problems when there's a problem. No matter if you're the provider of the straw for the chickens and if you're the manager of the plant, if there's a problem with what you do, you need to be able to make a plan, if you like. And that needs to be part of the training, excuse me, and also part of the assessment. Teamwork. We are all members of a team. You cannot function, especially at the moment, in a vacuum. So learners need to learn and be assessed on whether they are able to work effectively as a member of a team. Self-management. You can't manage other people if you're always late yourself. So how do you manage yourself? Organize yourself and your activities. You can't do that with other people if you can't manage your own activities. Information. We are bombarded in today's day and age with information. It comes across our computer screens, it comes across our phones, it comes from the boss. How do you pick the right information in your day-to-day work? When 20 things happen, how do you know which to focus on now to solve a specific problem? So how do you work with information? And remember, all of these things, it really doesn't matter what it is you do or at what level that you're doing. SACWA says, the South African Qualifications Authority says, if you are able to do these things properly, you will become a better functioning employee a better functioning human being, and you'll also be able to build on information. So there'll be able to be almost a career progression in what you're doing. Communication, clearly, you've got to be able to communicate properly. Communication also defined not only as talking, but also mathematical. So it's basic skills that you need in terms of functioning as a human being, language skills, budgeting skills, written and verbal. So basically talk properly and be able to calculate properly. That's what that is about. Science and technology. We know, look at what we're doing here today. It's a whole new ball game for all of us, but we've got to use science and technology effectively. And I think especially in your environment where you're working with live animals, I'd like to call them that, it is vital to be sensitive to all the practices that are necessary to be a sustainable producer of product. Yeah. That last one is a little bit, don't know who of you remember when you were little and you threw a little stone in the water and there's rings spiraling out. That's what that is. We are all functioning as a small bit of a bigger. So know that if I'm late today, somebody else is probably going to not be able to feed the chicken at the right time or whatever. Remember that your actions have an impact on other people, and make sure that, and other members of your team, make sure that those actions are appropriate at all times. And remember just this perspective again, why we're going through these things is because you, first of all, as a trainer, need to make sure that this is built into your training. And as an assessor, while you're assessing outcomes, can they prepare that forklift appropriately? When they do that, are they taking into account all these things that we've been through? Teamwork, communication, science and technology. Make sure that you don't drive the forklift in an enclosed area, that there's fresh air, etc. So those are just the kinds of things that you need to remember when you both train and assess your learners. Right, and I allow for questions again. Okay, let's go to the next slide. That's just a reminder again. Remember, we spoke about specific outcomes and embedded knowledge and applied competence. This is just another terminology for basically the same things. Specific outcomes in the unit standard relates to what SACWA calls practical competence. In other words, again, the things you do. Foundational or knowledge, the things you know, the theory you base your practice on. And then reflexive competence or ability to adapt to new and different situations. And if you are able to demonstrate competence in all three of those things, you will be achieving applied competence. That's one of the separate terms. So you've got to be demonstrating and assess on the things you do, the theory behind what you do, and your ability to adapt if things change. Okay. I want to take questions and then a small, say, 10-minute break. during which time I'll also be available to answer questions. Right, take a 10-minute break and then we'll tackle the last shift. Thank you. Right, I'm back. I'm going to stop showing slides for the rest of module 1, mainly because most of that information is background information. Remember what I said to you earlier, you as an assessor will really not have to worry too much about some of the surrounding issues unless it's a particular interest of you. Of yours, as long as you know how to conduct your own assessments within your company, it's fine. If there are any questions that somebody want to ask, there's a lot of useful information about the legislative bodies and some of the things like, for example, learnerships are described, learning programs. If there's any questions on that, you are welcome to ask me about those individually or email me. Exam tip quickly. The only thing I'm going to ask you theory-wise about module 1 is how you in your organization will apply those assessment principles when you do assessment. Okay? So that's your exam tip, because you're going to have to do a theory assignment for me as well. It's part of your portfolio building process. So, repeat again. How do this new way that we assess support those NQF principles that you looked at in the beginning this morning? So in other words, how do the way we assess now in this new way support the principle of integration of education and training? How does it support the principle of access, of recognition of prior learning? Okay, so that's your first exam tip. Anybody want to ask me a question about that?
Melinda, sorry, I see Theodore asked a question, right? I just want to make sure that we're all clear on what his question is and how we've answered it. So he says, after qualifying to be an assessor, is it possible that we can conduct assessments, that is first aid, fire training, etc., on our own without hiring an external company?
Yes.
So I'm not sure whether he's a bit confused with the question or if I'm understanding his question correctly. So yes, you can do assessments. So you can look at, yes, whether the first aid is being administered correctly or the fire training is being done or repeated in the correct manner. But when he says without hiring an external company, I'm just confused about that part of his question, because we don't, in essence, hire external companies to do those assessments, but we do hire external companies to do the training. So if his question is, can we replace the external company training for these specific areas, then the answer is no.
Yeah, you're right. That is a company decision, you know. So theoretically, if you can assess something, you can train it as well. But it would be totally that's part of the company policy, if you like, to decide who's doing the training, who's doing the assessment, and also who's doing the moderation, whether it's internal or external. But a person would certainly be able to do fire extinguisher training if he's competent, whether he does it as part of his job at Astral or not.
For sure. Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to clarify that, just
Thank
to
you.
make sure we're not sending the wrong message, because just
Thank you.
suddenly all the external fire training and first aid training gets removed from the budget and we don't have to do it anymore.
No, look, core business is always the most important. So whatever will work better will be what the company's decision is. You know, sometimes it's not cost effective to do every little bit of training yourself. Sometimes it's more cost effective to just outsource as and when.
Yeah, Okay, thank you, Melinda. Sorry that I interrupted.
No. It's very, very important. Thank you for that, Nikki. Right. Anything else? We've got another question. Who need approved or registered training? Well, we do need approved or registered training material. Absolutely, and you're going to get that. I know, and Nikki, you can help here if you want to. I know that Astral is in the process of getting accredited as a provider with AgriSeta. That's exactly why part of the process is to get assessors trained and registered. You definitely cannot award credits and assess if you're not part of a registered or accredited provider with registered training material or approved training material and registered assessors.
Okay, so maybe just if I understand it correctly as well, Melinda, and you must please help me here. So this is where the unit standard comes in, am I right? So what I understand thus far is that we've had to submit to the guy that's looking at the unit standard all our current induction training, our current quality and biosecurity training practices, and he's actually looked at how that integrates into the unit standard that he selected. So we shouldn't be expecting any new training material or any revised training material because we're going to be using our current and existing training material. Does that answer your question as well, Andres? Did I get that right, Melinda?
Definitely. That's what I also tried to make clear earlier. It's I always say it's not the dog. No, not the tail wagging the dog. The tail being SAQA and the dog being Astral. So you will still use your own training material. You will still check for the same things you did before. But somebody somewhere would have made sure that what you do internally is also linked externally and therefore is recognized nationally.
Yes, that's right. So what I'm saying to the group at large here now is that we don't have to change our training material. We can still use what we currently use because that assessment has already been done and translated into the correct unit standard that we will be putting forward or being assessed against. So, yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. What this group needs to take out of this training, above many other things, is the process of compliance with this now. So while you're still doing what you're doing, just make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, you know, in terms of you have to show a proper plan. You have to show an assessment plan. You have to give evidence that you prepare your learner, that you give them feedback, that there is an internal moderation process in place. So while still doing what you always did, you're now just basically jumping through another hoop so that you can give your learners recognition nationally.
Yep, I think we sort of working within a more structured, recognized framework with the existing material that we have right now. So that's what we're doing here.
Good. I'd like us to carry on with this train of thought and train of conversation. What I've put in front of you on the screen is 3 fairly generic type of definitions of what assessment is and what it means in terms of doing things differently. What I'd like you guys to try, and it's we can't give you a lot of time, it's something that you'll have to do afterwards as well, but I'd like you to turn to a couple of people around you and think of something very specific. You're going to go away after this training today and people are going to ask what you did and why you did it. I want you to chat about each or to each other about exactly how you, say you have to make a poster in your canteen, and you need to explain to your induction learners what is it that you're going to do to them now. What is this new assessment that you're going to do? And how will you explain to them what is going to happen? So I want you to try and work out in your head what this whole thing is about, much like we've been thrashing out a little bit now. But how will I explain to those group of learners in front of me what is now changing, what is different, what is this assessment that's going to happen to you or with us? Are you clear on that? Right, while you're having your discussion, you're welcome to also put some thoughts on the chat so that I can read what you're saying and see if you're on the right track. But yeah, just a few, it's a discussion. It's just a discussion about how you will explain to your learners what this thing is that you're now doing after the training. Okay. Right, you're welcome to give me some thoughts on what your thought processes are in your groups. And if you want to ask me questions, please feel free.
Melinda, maybe you've got the list of guys in front of you, so maybe you can ask a group, pick a group in front of you and ask them for
Country
some
share.
feedback. Yeah.
Have you got your head around this?
So maybe, are you asking the agri team? Yeah, maybe ask the agri team, because Vernon's from commercial and they...
Maybe the agri team, yeah.
Yeah, the agri team. Like Kerry or Madeleine.
How are you
from
going to
their
explain
team.
to your new group of inductees what on earth you're doing with them now?
Are they going to type you an answer, Melinda?
Maybe one of the members in the agri team, raise your hand and then you can speak to all of us live.
So County Fair Agri team, the spotlight's on you.
We can try KZN.
Tommy, Duncan, Dennis, KZN Agri Team.
They dumbstruck. Shame. I feel for them. This is new for all of us. We'll get
Come on.
through, guys. We'll get it. We'll get it.
But you can't let the Agri Team down, guys. Maybe we should ask the guys from Central Region. Nico, your team.
Somebody raise their
here's-
hand. Please,
Yep.
you're going to go live and then I'll check what Vernon said. It's hand geraised. Please unmute whoever raised your hand. Okay, looks like you're unmuted. KZN manager.
Morning. Good day. How are you?
Fine, and you? Sorry, this is such
Nice.
a slow process. How can you enlighten us, sir?
It's Dennis from KZN Netchicks. Dennis from KZN Netchicks, Melinda.
Yes. How
Yeah.
how do you think you will be able to explain to the people that you train what this new process of assessment is? Can you see yourself going back to your company and actually implementing this?
Yes, I can do that.
How
By,
how and how will
yeah,
you explain to the learners and to the other trainers?
I will set up a meeting. Then, for sure, I'll have my posters ready that I'll put it on a display
Mm-hmm.
and discuss them like in a form of training. Then,
Okay.
after training them, I need to assess them or check their understanding by asking questions.
Absolutely.
For sure, I need to put it on record that this
Yes.
was the content of the training. This is what was given to them as me as a trainer. Then the proof of evidence, that's like a attendance form that they're gonna sign that they understand the training, and I'm gonna ask a few questions just to test their understanding.
Absolutely. And what would be the topic? What are some of the topics that you train? Just give me an example.
I'll make a topic like this one for COVID to say when you're attending funerals, what you must do before you attend the funeral from work, like to say you need to apply by filling up a form, you need to be authorized by your manager and the HR. Then after the funeral, how many days you must take after the funeral, and you must come back with the proof that you went to the funeral and you seen the health department to confirm that you don't have symptoms that you're going to come and spread it to the team so that you can stay safe.
Okay. And
Yeah, that's
after
okay.
you've done that and you've assessed him, how will you give him feedback? How will you tell him how he did?
Giving the feedback for sure. That is what we're doing by looking at the stats, how many people that are positive, how many people that they recovered, how many people that they've died, of which we don't have people that have died, because I think this sanitizing and social distancing is working for us now, because if you look at from March up until now, it shows that we are doing the right thing.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate the comment.
Okay, thanks, Melinda.
Thank you. Anybody else that maybe wants to ask or say anything? From commercial, maybe? Somebody from commercial maybe want to give it some thought. How are we going to implement this?
Kurt's team from Mountain Valley. Are you guys there? Do you want to raise your hand and maybe answer? Because Vernon's from commercial as well, Melinda. He's written a small response on the Q&A.
I've seen that.
So we'll ask the guys maybe in KZN. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that actually has disappeared again. But thank you, Vernon. I saw that.
Oh, nobody from KZN. Maybe you ask one of the guys from Meadow as well.
Okay.
Choose a Meadow. Anyone.
Okay. Somebody from Meadow is there.
Must I choose someone? Here's
I think so.
Alan. Alan's saying something. He's from the hatchery. So he's from the agri team in Central Region, National Chicks Agri Team. So go for it, Alan. Just unmute yourself.
Hi, Nikki. We've got Isabella just want to explain what she's going to do in the egg room.
I'm struggling. You must get a bit closer. I can't hear.
Hi, Isabella.
We can hear you, Isabella. So Isabella's going to tell us what she's going to do in the egg room, if I heard correctly. Okay, go for it, Isabella.
I'm very chuffed. We're actually chuffed about this because it is something that will also, help us in a process of, identifying, people that we can, let's say you get a position for a foreman. So let's say, for instance, now in the room, what we're planning to do is actually I already got my portfolio. I'm making money already. That I'll first assess the foreman and check, his level of competency. Maybe assess his job descriptions, his job descriptions, and then assess his responsibilities, and obviously, and then do my planning on how I'm going to maybe actually like better him and upgrade his skills. And then I'll use obviously what we plan here, follow all the guidelines that we've been provided with. Actually, I feel this is actually nice. And then obviously then take it down to the grading team, and also do the same job descriptions, assess their responsibility, and also do a planning on how we're going to evaluate them. Because how I understand is this, how I will explain to them, let's say I confirm them and I explain to them, I'll tell them that this is, we will be acknowledging the potential that you have and acknowledging your skills, so that if there's something that is, or let's say there's opportunities arising, we all know already that we already equipped our people, and then also we complying with the obviously the acts or the laws, or with the company policies. So it's actually, I'm actually chuffed about this program. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Isabella. I must be honest, I didn't hear all of that, but you were definitely on the right track.
Now, what am I lower? What I was highlighting is, I'm chuffed about this program because it's something that we'll use to equip our employees.
Absolutely, that's correct.
It will energize the workplace because, people will have more interest in, will have more interest in, let's say, making sure that they do their level best, to do their job right, because they know that end of the day I will be assessed, and I will be acknowledged, and I will be certified to say, what, I can actually do this job. And let's say there's an opportunity inside, and then obviously I'm certified and doing 1, 2, 3, because what we normally do in our workplace, we'll actually use all this guidance that we've gathered, and then we'll also equip others so that, let's say you were trained on doing this thing, and then there's an opportunity. Then those people will know that, what, I've earned this, I'm certified, I've acquired a skill, and my manager or is aware that, what, Isabella can do 1, 2, 3, and then if there's an opportunity, I'll be considered.
Yes.
So it's actually chuffed about this program. Thanks.
Absolutely. And this will it's a process, a vehicle to facilitate all of that, definitely.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, I see Alan's name. Well, sorry, that was you.
We're part of the same group, Melinda.
Maybe we can ask Dolan from the feed mill, since we didn't have any feedback from anyone from the feed mill. Dolan, are you going to raise your hand? There he is.
Dolan, you there, I think?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I don't know. I think the biggest thing, it's also why I asked about the certificates and competency, and that taking it back to the mole and now telling them they're going to be assessed, I think that's going to be a problem. The moment you say assessment or test or exam to someone, they're not going to be very excited and they don't want to do it. But if you motivate them something like a certificate, they might want to do it. So I think that would be my way in, to motivate how we would change our system to do the assessments.
I think, Dolan, you do raise a very valid point. Right? People get scared. I think even we as well, when we hear we have to write these tests and we have to do this portfolio of evidence, you get afraid. But I think one thing that I've taken away from here, which I don't see in practice a lot, is the fact that during this assessment, we need to say to them that we are here to support them. We are here to give them, to coach them. We should have an open relationship where they can ask when they don't understand. So it's that whole analogy of kick the wall down. We're not doing that anymore. And that's the new skill we've learned from all of this as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Nikki. And it is, you know, the unknown is always fearful. So that's why I asked if you have to think about how you're going to almost demystify this process to the learners, because they are, and sometimes people are also, what's the word, skeptical. You know, if they don't understand it properly, they think, why are you now suddenly assessing or testing me? Do you want to fire me? Do you want to, you know? So it's important that we remember as assessors that we are there to support these learners and to guide them and to say to them, look, it should be fun. That's something I haven't said yet today. Learning and assessment should be fun. And maybe that's how I want to leave you today. If you can think of when you go and do these assessments, how can you make it fun? Yes, they have to learn, but learning shouldn't be as intimidating as it used to be. So think about that. Okay, it looks like we've reached the end of our time. Shall I allow a final opportunity for questions? And remember, I'm still going to be here for the next half an hour to round off. But I'd like to formally close the meeting. And then I will, before I do that, I just want to see if there's any further questions. And then I'm just going to briefly explain what happens before next time. Right. Guys, before you go today, please sign some form of attendance register if there's one available. The CETA is quite strict, especially with this online thing. You know, they want people to still keep proper record of having attended training and stuff. So please try and sign one, or if there isn't one, we'll make sure that between now and next time we'll sort that out. Okay.
Melinda, can I just interject very briefly? Guys, you do have an Astral attendance register for any training, so I think you can use the same document. And I'd like the guys that we're named as the collators or my go-to people to please it. Melinda, would you prefer them to forward it directly to you?
No, whatever they normally do internally, they can, yeah, it doesn't have to, I just have to get them at some point.
Okay, so maybe I think, yeah.
They forward it directly to me.
Yes, I think it would be easier.
Okay.
So the people that we're coordinating all of these training sessions can just make sure that they forward the training register directly to Melinda. I will send out an email just to remind you after this as well.
Remember, this is your Astral training register. I didn't want to bring extra paperwork to you. So whatever you normally fill in and however you fill it in, that will be sufficient for me. I'll work with that. Okay.
Okay, that's fine.
And please, between now and the next session, which will be on the 1st, please ask me as much as you can. Read more. I'm going to try and do some homework of my own. As I said, this was my first online experience, and I'm a little bit frustrated with myself, I must say. But I'm going to really do some thinking, chat to Nikki, and see how we can make it a little bit easier. And I want to get very practical. I didn't get through everything I wanted to do with you today, but I'm going to try and make sure that by the next session, you will have a better idea of exactly how to put together the portfolio and also just how to be a good practicing assessor. Okay. So that's then it from my side. Unless there's anything more from your side, I will close the meeting, but I will be available for the next 25 minutes or so in case somebody wants to answer me. You can also send me direct emails. My email address is on the front of your files, or you can WhatsApp me on my phone number, which is also on the front of your files. Thank you. All right.
Thank you, Melinda.
Thank you, Nikki. Appreciate it. We'll chat.
Yes, take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.